Welcome back to this episode of Beyond the Game with Hal. Today, I welcome a very, very special guest by the name of Gary Williams. Gary is known for his profound takes and his insightful insight in the golf world. He has been the host of Morning Drive and is now has his own show, Five Clubs. Gary is known for his unique perspective while talking and interviewing players, and he's had some pretty cool things that he has been able to do while in the media landscape. Today's interview with Gary is one that you wouldn't want to miss. So welcome in, Gary. I'm excited to have you on.
Hal, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Appreciate you inviting me.
Of course. And my first question for you is, obviously, you started golfing at a very young age, not the track that you would have liked to be on to become a pro golfer, but still in the sports media landscape that all of us love. What was it like for you to get into the sports media world and then eventually continue your passion of being a golf broadcaster and media personality?
Yeah, Hal, I was very lucky. You mentioned 5 years as a club professional. I was at some great places, places that you would say, my gosh, why would you ever want to leave the industry? I found myself believing that I had seen as good as it could be. My last job was at Seminole Golf Club, which is obviously a very historic place. And I knew, in my mid-20s that I didn't find myself being fulfilled there, stimulated there, and also felt satisfied that I had seen. It wasn't like I thought, well, if I got to one of those places, maybe I would feel different. I was at one of those places. So I made the decision to get out of the golf, club professional side of it. I had done some radio, had written some stuff in college, had done it in high school as well, which is, a modest amount of experience. And I just so happened to get connected with a guy who was the general manager over a cluster of CBS-owned radio stations in Charlotte, where I live again now. And he said, we're starting a golf show on the weekend. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, sure. I mean, it was really for kicks. And I was doing that on Saturday mornings. And they had a full, weekday lineup of hosts. And the morning host, these two guys did not get along. He fired this guy and he said, you know what? I want you to be the host of our all sports formatted radio show. I'm going to give you a 3-year contract to give you time to make it work. And that was in 1999. And, I knew that I wanted to do it. I had no idea where it would lead. And I started doing that in June of 1999 and started television soon after, doing play-by-play for college football, college basketball, did studio work for the NBA, for the Charlotte Hornets, did the Carolina Panthers preseason TV package. And I was not unhappy. I was very happy. And then I took a job at the SiriusXM, moved to New York City, was the first morning radio host on Mad Dog Radio, Chris Russo obviously being the anchor there in the afternoons. And I was there maybe just under 2 years when the Golf Channel, I knew just because I knew some people in the golf industry still, that they were keen on establishing and starting a morning show. And I got the job to be one of the original co-hosts of Morning Drive. You mentioned Morning Drive in the open, and was there as one of the original hosts for the entire 10-year run of the program. So it was really some happenstance. And then, obviously proved myself to be competent enough to get these other assignments. But the golf thing was always the most, passionate thing that I had in my life. It was the thing I loved the most. And to be able to narrow my focus when I got to Golf Channel, even though I still love all sports, still watch everything. And I watch the broadcasts of everything. I don't just watch the sport. I pay very close attention to all these great broadcasters, studio hosts, play-by-play guys, the analysts. So I feel very fortunate to have the run that I've had.
Right. And you hosted the same show for 10, 11 years. We're talking about golf, and there's going to be the same names. Tiger was almost dominating every day on that show. He was always the number one guy. There were so many guys through that time period that almost stayed there. How did you create original stuff and not just say the same thing day after day? Because it gets hard when you're doing a weekly show for so long with almost the same names. Because it's not like football that, oh, this team's adding new players, this team's getting a new coach. There's all these players, and they're really doing basically the same thing with the same goal.
It's a great question. Luckily, Golf Channel, we had the rights to every tour. So there were many days, especially Thursday through Sunday. Now, the first couple of years of Morning Drive, we were only a Monday through Friday show, but we were still live 2 hours every morning. So yeah, in 2011, Tiger was still, he was the driving force. There's no doubt. But you were very young at this time, but in 2011 began the introduction. Rory broke into the top 10 for the first time at the end of 2009. And obviously 2011, he won his first major championship. So, look, the game was getting deeper. We covered the globe. We had the rights to the European Tour, now called the DP World Tour. We covered the LPGA. We talked about the Champions Tour. And what's interesting about Morning Drive, when it was started, the guy who started the show, who was running Golf Channel at the time, his name was Pete Stathakis. And Pete came from all sports. And he loved golf, but he wanted Morning Drive to have some broad views on other things. And so we talked about other sports. But what the research department told us pretty quickly was they don't like it. They don't want you talking about football. They don't want you talking about anything else other than the golf. They're a Golf Channel specifically for you to talk about that one subject matter. So, it was our responsibility to be creative, to introduce people to young players, to stories that maybe they were unfamiliar with. And so, you start thinking about that particular time. Jordan Spieth turned pro in 2013. He was 19 years of age, but he'd already finished in the top 25 of a PGA Tour event when he was 16 at the Byron Nelson. So, it doesn't take long. Like we think about today, and we think about all these college guys that are getting PGA Tour starts. And now, with PGA Tour U, there's some familiarity. So your question's a great one. It was really incumbent upon all of us to go, yeah, we get it. Tiger is always going to be interesting. And he also started to get injured at that time. So the reliability of Tiger to drive the conversation when he's not playing was not there. You could bring him up. We could talk about him. You could speculate on when he would be back. But it was, hey, let's talk about, these young players. And obviously at that time, Europe was starting to show great depth. And obviously, you start thinking about Celtic Manor in 2010. Obviously, they had lost in 2008, but they started to become so good in that particular event that there was a familiarity with all these guys, Graham McDowell, Henrik Stenson, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, Luke Donald. And during that period when Tiger was injured, we started to see, and it didn't mean that they had the appeal, the traction, and the popularity of Tiger, but there was a period there where all these guys from Rory, who got to world number one for the first time. I was there that day. He got there when he won the Honda. By the way, Tiger shot 62 that day in the final round, and Rory won the golf tournament, got to world number one. Martin Keimer got to world number one. And Martin Keimer actually, the other thing about us that we were lucky with Morning Drive was golfers watched the show, players who played the game. They're like, my God, I'm up early in the morning. These guys are conditioned, and the women to get out and get their work done early in the day. They watched. And I was doing, they would come on the show. They would come in the studio. I was doing features with all these players. As a matter of fact, Rory, when he had the lead after 54 holes at the Masters in 2011, we had only been on the air for 4 months. And we reached out to his agent, and the first start he had after that Masters, I caddied for him in the Pro-Am at the Memorial. And I wound up spending half the day with him. We had 3 cameras out there with him. And 2 weeks later, he won the U.S. Open. So even though, yes, Tiger was still the driving force, we were lucky enough with the real estate that we had to really spend time talking about everybody. So we felt a responsibility to introduce people to these people and to these players. And at the time, the best women's player in the world was Yanni Sen. She was winning everything. And so she would come into the studio. She lived in Orlando. And there were a lot of players at that time who had not migrated down to the Jupiter area. A lot of the European players, a lot of guys still living out at Isleworth. So Ian Poulter, Graham McDowell, heck, even Ricky Fowler, Bubba Watson, these guys would come into the studio and do the whole show. So it was a good time in that you still wanted Tiger to be healthy and playing on a regular basis, but it allowed us to really spend time introducing people to all these new guys and new women who were becoming really the driving force of the news cycle in golf on an everyday basis.
Right. And another thing for you, you mentioned interviewing players and then coming on the show. How do you build those connections with those players so that they want to come back on your show, whether it was with Golf Channel or your show now? How do you build the connection with them, but also get good questions and do good prep so the audience enjoys it?
Yeah, Hal, it's something that, I've always loved television. And I used to watch a lot of studio shows when I was a kid. I watched political news shows. And I paid particular attention to people who I thought were good interviewers. I like one-on-one interview shows very much. I still listen quite a bit to people who have long-form conversations. And so I wanted to be fair. And most importantly, I think the greatest ingredient in being fair is being informed. And so I would do a lot of reading, and I spent a lot of time trying to learn as much as I could about these people so that these conversations were not simply about, why you shot 65 on Sunday. It was about trying to understand their motivation, their background, the people who inspired them. And I think, being fair is the greatest avenue to access. Now, look, there are other ways to get access, and there are people who ingratiate themselves to interview subjects, and that's fine. And I'm not trying to do hit jobs on anybody. I have always the greatest lesson I ever learned was when I was doing the Carolina Panthers preseason TV. I was lucky enough to gain the trust of the guy who was the head coach at the time, John Fox, and John Fox gave me access to try to understand as best I could the way the game was played. And that meant looking at what they look at, which is the view of all 22 players on the field. And what I found was that there was so much I didn't know. And so it wasn't that I was hedging or reluctant to be critical. It's that I knew what I didn't. And that's the way that I kind of view it still today is I know what I don't. And what I want to do is try to learn more. And I think people over time, when they hear you and they realize that you're not only trying to do the best you can to understand as much as you can, but that fairness, which is an elusive thing. And there are times that I may say things that are critical of people that they might not particularly like. But usually it comes from a place that I feel like I'm informed enough to have a fairly strong position. And so I think that, people's willingness to come on Morning Drive then, and it wasn't just me, it was trust built by everybody else who was on the show. And then the show now is, look, over time, you get to know people. What I don't say to anybody is, look, I don't profess to know any of these players intimately. I wouldn't even say that I'm friends necessarily with anybody. I have relationships. I have professional relationships. Some of them I know a little bit better, but I've never gone out of my way to try to express that I really know them, because I don't. I cover them. And in covering them, you then spend time around them and you get to know a little bit more. And then the more you spend, the more revealing they might be to you, so that when you do have them on, you're coming from a place where, one, They're there for a reason. They're willing, which is something I greatly appreciate. And two, I'd like to believe they know that I'm going to be coming from a place of being informed, and two, most importantly, being fair.
Right. And you spent so many years doing the same show with like almost the same people. And then you went off and started your own show that you host now called Five Clubs. And it's based off the five original clubs and starting the USGA, which I actually think that's a very interesting thing. And I like that the title has a big background. But on your show, you guys have a lot of unique and interesting series that I've seen, such as the card, recapping logos, recapping courses, and then even a segment with dogs. How do you guys over there with your show keep all the different segments of golf and make it as fun as it could possibly be?
Yeah, I one of the things when Golf Channel reached out first specifically to me, and then in turn, the people who are part of this team, the owner of the company that owns Five Clubs, which is Signature Sports Group. And so I'm the executive producer of the show. I have an associate producer. I have a technical director. I have a stage manager, camera people. And so it's my primary responsibility to format the show every day. And those things that you mentioned, some of those things are recurring. We do dogs every week. The reason why we do dogs is that, one, I have dogs myself. I have great affection for them. I also, when I've traveled overseas, I found that dogs are part of the landscape of golf, particularly in the UK. And some of my best experiences, when I was going over there and playing golf with my dad, I was having dogs literally in our group. One of my greatest experiences, one of my favorite places, and really this was kind of the impetus for the whole Dogs of the Week thing, was Sunningdale, which is this great historic club about 30 miles from London. They used to have the World Match Play there, one of the great events really in the history of golf. Every great player, with few exceptions, have won it. And when I went there, I noticed that literally there was a dog that was in every group. Somebody either brought their dog or two people had dogs, and it was all different breeds. They were very obedient. And I felt like, my God, they just made the whole experience that much better. And I was curious to see how many dogs in this country, when we started the show on Golf Channel, have a relationship with the game. And the truth is, there are lots. We have so many people we have a catalog. We're so backlogged. We try to do 5 a week, which is the last segment of every show each week. And so, back to your original question about kind of formatting the show, we told Golf Channel when they reached out about the idea of us becoming kind of their morning show, there were 2 critical things that had to be in place in order for us to agree to do it. One, it was going to be live, because I think live television, one, the game is global. There's things happening all the time. I didn't want the show to be taped. And I also find live television to be far more stimulating than other things, which it doesn't mean that they're not fulfilling. I love doing what you're doing, which is these conversations that you get recorded and then you distribute them out and people can consume them whenever they want. And then the other thing is that the show was going to be an industry show. We were going to talk about everything. We were going to talk about the business of golf. We were going to talk, certainly professional golf was going to be the driving force, but we were going to talk about design, and we were going to have golf course architects and designers on the show. And we were going to talk about instruction. As a matter of fact, all next week on my show, the entire week is going to be the top instructors in the world who are going to be joining me to talk about their philosophy on working with everyday golfers, but also the best players in the world. And so we wanted people to feel like when they put the show on, that not every day we're going to be able to satisfy the things that matter most to them, but that over time, everything that is part of the ecosystem of golf is going to be talked about. And that's what we do. And some weeks, like, a major week or the players or the Ryder Cup, of course, it's going to be the whole subject matter, but there's a lot going on. And look, it's also, the timing for us was very good. The reason why all these wonderful podcasts and digital content and all these things are happening is because, look, just in the last couple of years, there have been literally over 6 million people in this country alone who have come into the game of golf, who are using golf in one way or another, whether it's going to Topgolf or playing short courses or taking lessons. So golf's in a great place. Timing was great. But we had an express purpose for people to feel like when their day was starting, that we were talking about everything as it related to the game of golf.
Right. And something that really stood out, the designers. The designers don't really get mentioned a lot. And that's kind of the best part of golf. You're playing, I like to say I'm playing against the course. My opponent is the golf course, and they are the ones who design it. So that's cool that you shout that out on your show. And another thing for you is you mentioned stuff with the YouTube golf and the golf podcast. Where do you think golf is going in the direction with all these YouTube golfers?
Hal, I think golf is going in the direction of everybody your age, which is younger. In just the last 5 years, the overall demographics of the game have shifted so significantly that younger people make up the larger majority of people who play the game of golf than older people. That's the first time ever. And so the reason why all of, whether it's YouTube golf or whether it's TGL or whether it's grass clippings and all of this content being produced in large measure by the people who are out there chasing the game in all these different forms and fashions are primarily younger people, is because younger people are consuming and participating in golf at a level that's never been seen before. And I think it's great. And I've had several people, and one in particular stood out to me when I was doing a fireside chat at an event. And at the end of it, I took questions, and a guy about my age said, look, my son doesn't watch golf on television with me. He'd rather watch YouTube golf. Is that a bad thing? And I said, of course not. I mean, he's in golf. And the truth is that if I was your son's age, there's a real possibility that I would be consuming golf that way. I don't know. I didn't have that option at that age. I didn't have the option of whether it was watching golf on CBS or NBC or ESPN, Plus and PGA Tour Live. Would I watch golf that way? Maybe. Or would I watch these younger people who are my age, who I would look at and identify with maybe more? I think that's where the game's going. The game has gotten more youthful. It's gotten more accepting. It's not as stodgy and old and as intimidating. It doesn't mean it's still not to some degree intimidating for people, but these different penetration points of people to try golf for the first time, they're casual, they're fun. You're not in this daunting environment like going and somebody's saying, I'm going to invite you to play golf. Okay, how long is that going to take? Well, the round's probably going to be close to 5 hours, and we'll hit balls before, we may have lunch after. You're going to be gone all day. Like, that's a hard thing for anybody to do. So now you can do it in all these different ways, including watching stuff for a half an hour or an hour and be entertained and find yourself more interested in the game overall. So game's getting younger. I don't think that's going to stop. And I still think, look, as people get older, people who are watching YouTube golf now, are they going to be watching golf on CBS in 10 or 15 years? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay, and one more thing for you before we get into the Final 14 is you've been covering golf for so long, and you mentioned your best memories aren't just in the booth, but they're actually playing. How do you think covering the game for so long has changed you as a player?
Wow, what a good question. I was never somebody who had expectations of being an elite player. I was a competent club professional. I was, at a time, a legitimate scratch player. I'm a 2-3 now. I think that covering the game has done a couple things. It's made me appreciate simply the time that I have with the people that I'm with, more so than getting wrapped up in the score. It doesn't mean that I'm not still, hyper competitive, because I am. The other thing in covering the game is having a real good understanding of something that I used to really bristle at, because I would hear a lot of players, and it's a term that you hear a lot, and that is trust the process. And I used to think that was kind of a throwaway line to not really get into what is the nitty gritty of what their process is. And I have grown to have, I've always appreciated people who play the game for a living, because I think it's an amazing accomplishment to make a living playing golf, because there's so many people who are good, and to get up to that upper echelon is the thinnest air imaginable. But the process of continuing to believe that you're still good enough, it's something that I took for granted when I started covering the game. And particularly now, I mentioned earlier about depth, the depth of where players are coming from now, whether it is from the Far East or, countries like Norway and Denmark and Austria, not to mention South America. There are so many people capable of making a living. And for them to be able to build a belief system that keeps them on that wheel and keeping their lights on. And, here's a perfect example. It's Stephen Alker, who, I'm not saying you should know every detail about his life, but somehow, some way, Stephen Alker made enough money to get to the age of 50. And now Stephen Alker is out there winning golf tournaments against people like Jim Furyk and Steve Stricker and Ernie Els and Retief Goosen. These are Hall of Fame type players. That's an amazing dedication to a craft that wants to break you and wants you to believe that you're not good enough, because it's not just your own frailties, but it's looking next to you and going, I'm not as good as this guy. I mean, and it's an impossible thing not to compare yourself, whether it's with data or with your own eye examination. Like if Peter Malnati gets paired with Rory, like, why wouldn't he go home that night and go, I can't do this? Come on. But yet he's managed.
Right.
A couple times, So, appreciating the time with people that I'm with, and having a greater appreciation for those who are still doing it after all these years.
Right. And that goes the same for YouTube golf too. Like, they're making a living off of playing golf on YouTube. All right. To end it off here, we have the final 14 questions in a rapid fire pace. Dude, done them with everyone. No explanation needed. Rapid fire, final 14. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Who's your idol?
Ben Crenshaw.
Favorite fast food?
Chick-fil-A.
Favorite school subject?
Political science. I was a poli-sci major.
Biggest fear?
Heights.
Favorite hobby?
Reading.
Favorite gym workout?
It's a good one. Probably yoga now.
Favorite media personality?
Woo! Living or dead?
Either or.
Okay. Dave Marr, who is the lead analyst for ABC's golf coverage, was my favorite guy of all time.
I like that answer. It's very different than the ones I've been getting, but I like it. Favorite musician?
Van Morrison.
Favorite animal?
Dogs.
Favorite TV show?
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Biggest pet peeve?
People who use the word like as a connector to every sentence.
Totally agree. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Favorite emoji?
The eyes rolling.
And then last but not least, are you a shower singer?
No. As soon as my voice changed, Hal, I was out of the singing business.
Like a drum, baby, don't stop beating. Like a drum,